Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We continue chapter 21, the ascent of life, beginning with the sentence, the second term of the original status of life is subconscious will. And that is page
217, 217. So, let's start reading. The second term of the original status of life is subconscious will, which in the secondary status becomes hunger and conscious desire. Hunger and desire, the first seed of conscious mind. The growth into the third status of life by the principle of association, the growth of love, does not abolish the law of desire, but rather transforms and fulfills it. Love is in its nature the desire to give oneself to others and to receive others in exchange. It is a commerce between being and being. Physical life does not desire to give itself. It desires only to receive. It is true that it is compelled to give itself, for the life which only receives and does not give must become barren, wither, and perish. If indeed such life in its entirety is possible at all, here or in any world. But it is compelled, not willing. It obeys the subconscious impulse of nature rather than consciously shares in it. Even when love intervenes, the self-giving at first still preserves to a large extent the mechanical character of the subconscious will in the atom. Love itself at first obeys the law of hunger and enjoys the receiving and exacting from others rather than the giving and surrendering to others, which it admits chiefly as a necessary price for the thing that it desires. But here, it has not yet attained to its true nature. The true law is to establish an equal commerce in which the joy of giving is equal to the joy of receiving and tends in the end to become even greater. But that is when it is shooting beyond itself under the pressure of the psychic flame to attain to the fulfillment of utter unity, and has therefore to realize that which seemed to it not self, as an even greater and dearer self than its own individuality. In its life origin, the law of love is the impulse to realize and fulfill oneself in others and by others, to be enriched by enriching, to possess and be possessed, because without being possessed, one does not possess oneself utterly. So, it's not very difficult, but
not very difficult, but very interesting, especially the last part.
That's right. So we'll see what he's saying. The second term of the original status of life. So, the original status of life is matter. So, the first term was immortality of atom, mechanical unconscious force, and unformed seed of individuality. Second term is the dumb urge of physical energy, and also force-driven subconscious will. He's saying it is subconscious will, hunger and subconscious will. That second term becomes in life hunger, conscious desire. That's right, hunger and desire, the first seed of conscious mind. The first seed of conscious mind. In matter, it is force-driven subconscious will. In life, in the second status, it becomes hunger, and in the third one, it becomes cooperation. Therefore, Srimad is saying, hunger in life is a seed of what it will become in the mind. Okay, that's what he's saying. So, the growth into the third status of life, which is mind, by the principle of association. So, we have here very clearly love and association. It becomes love and association. And cooperation is also cooperation. Hunger becomes cooperation. So, the growth of love does not abolish the law of desire, but rather transforms and fulfills it. It changes character. Desire becomes cooperation. Love is in its nature the desire to give oneself to others and to receive others in exchange. Whereas the desire in the life is only to receive and not to give. So here in mind, when it comes, it is to give and receive also. More receive than give perhaps, but...
I think that's what Sri Aurobindo indicates in philanthropy.
Yes, that's right. Philanthropy is not a spiritual movement because it is just a self-satisfaction. I have done something wonderful. So it's ego. And when it is ego-based, then it cannot be. And this is a very subtle thing because it's interesting because I discussed this with the children. Philanthropy is when you feel very holy and very nice. I've helped so many people. I've fed 100 people today, so I'm fine. If somebody comes and tells you, you are doing this for yourself, your own satisfaction and not for others, he may say, okay, I won't advertise. I won't tell anybody that I have done this. I'll do it incognito. I'll feed 100 people. Now what do you say if he says, the answer to that will be, the ego will be even greater. Because you say, so look, I am doing such a good job without telling anybody. So the ego becomes even greater. So there's no escaping from that. It's a very subtle thing.
Like even in spiritual gains, people do something with the idea of getting spiritual gains, but that also is not a selfless thing.
Okay,
right?
the one you are talking about is, he discusses that in the essays on the Gita. When you do something, you sacrifice something to get something, you will get. The divine often allows you to get what you want. But along with that, what you're asking for is something very limited. So along with that will come other forces to bother you. I'll give you an example, then you'll understand. Okay. To everything, there are forces that attach themselves. Okay. Now, I put a grain of sugar on the table. Within no time at all, ants will be coming. When there is a shipping boat going in the sea and they are catching fish, there will be a whole host of birds flying to get there. So everything attracts certain forces. Now, when you are asking the divine for wealth, you will get wealth. You may get. It depends on how you're. In the essays on the Gita, Sri Krishna says, I will give them. But along with wealth, what will come in? People will come and ask you for donations. People will come and ask you for all sorts of things. Thieves will come into your house. All the other forces also will be attracted. Just like flies to a sweet. So you get what you want, but there will be consequences. So, if you really ask something from the divine, you are likely, if in all sincerity you ask and you believe, you will get it. But as I said, it is something limited you are asking. Along with that, there will be other forces that come in.
Yeah, he does even say at one point that you have limited yourself
Yes.
by asking for something limited.
Exactly. I might as well mention here, although it's not really, there's a very interesting movie, Hollywood movie, called Bedazzled. I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
Okay. It's a story of a fellow who is very dissatisfied with his life and he says, I'd like to change my circumstances of life. Okay. And he's thinking, his life is very dull, and so suddenly someone comes and says, you were asking for something? So he says, yes, I was thinking that it would be nice to change the circumstances. So this person says, it's a woman, and she says, I can give you whatever you want. Then, how do you know that? How will I contact you? Then she says, here's my card. And she gives the card, and on that visiting card is written only the devil. Okay? Then he says, if I just remember you, you'll come. He says, yes. Then one day he says, he calls her and she comes. Then she gives him 6 wishes and they'll come true. Okay, it's a very interesting movie. It's done in the Hollywood style, but there is a truth behind it. Then the first thing he says, I want a lot of money. So what does he become? He becomes a drug lord in Colombia. Okay, so now he has his wealth. But along with that, so many other things. The police come and this sort of thing goes on until finally he has only one wish left and he calls her and says, please, my last wish is cancel all these wishes. So this is exactly the same truth that what you ask you will get, but you must be careful as to what you are asking. Okay, so let's get back to our life divine. Love is in its nature the desire to give oneself to others and to receive others in exchange. It's a commerce between being and being. So it is desire, but not desire only to get, but also to give and get. It changes character at the third status of life, which is mind. Physical life does not desire to give itself. It desires only to receive. It is true that it is compelled to give itself, for the life which only receives and does not give must become barren, wither and perish. If indeed such life in its entirety is possible at all, here or in any world. But it is compelled, not willing. It obeys the subconscious impulse of nature rather than consciously shares in it. That hunger which is there is operating here in love also. That's what he says. Even when love intervenes, the self-giving at first still preserves to a large extent the mechanical character of the subconscious will in the atom. That hunger and subconscious will is still there in human love. Then, he says, love itself at first obeys the law of hunger and enjoys the receiving and exacting from others rather than the giving and surrendering to others, which it admits chiefly as a necessary price for the thing that it desires. Unwillingly you have to give so that you receive.
You have a question?
Can you explain the term in any world? A few sentences ago he was using the word in any world.
Yes.
What does he mean by that?
Not only in the physical world, I suppose it's a way of saying that this law holds good anywhere. Probably that's what he means.
I think so.
Like the law of love is the same in all the worlds.
Yeah.
But does it become more and more subtle? Or the law is the law, it stays the same?
No, but he speaks about how it becomes more subtle.
If it goes higher and higher, Nili, it will become subtler and subtler. It won't hold this, that won't be there. So let's read the sentence.
He speaks of this now when he speaks of the psychic flame.
Okay. So let's read a little further, then we see. Okay? Yeah. For the thing that it desires. As a price for the thing that it desires. But here, it has not yet attained to its true nature. The true law is to establish an equal commerce in which the joy of giving is equal to the joy of receiving and tends in the end to become even greater. But that is when it is shooting beyond itself under the pressure of the psychic flame to attain to the fulfillment of utter unity and has therefore to realize that which seemed to it not self. That means something other than itself, as an even greater and dearer self than its own individuality. He's talking about the cosmic consciousness. When you know that you are everything, so that becomes a happy giving of oneself, because you are giving to yourself. Is it here he mentions that, or is it somewhere else? In one of the Upanishads, he says that the Yajnavalkya is saying, the wife is dear to you, to the self, okay, for two reasons. First reason is at a selfish level. Second reason is when you go to the self, you realize that you are everything else, and love is automatic and spontaneous, and you are in a cosmic consciousness. You are only giving to yourself and you are giving to others. So it's true on two levels. So this he mentions in Life Divine somewhere else also.
Now, next sentence is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. In its life origin, the law of love is the impulse to realize and fulfill oneself in others and by others, to be enriched by enriching, to possess and be possessed, because without being possessed, one does not possess oneself utterly. In its life origin, he is saying, the law of love is the impulse to realize and fulfill oneself in others and by others, to be enriched by enriching, to possess and be possessed, because without being possessed, one does not possess oneself utterly. This is the law, the origin of the law. But when it in life, it is hunger. So when it comes to mind, it is becoming more and more the true law. That's what. And finally, when you go beyond the mind, it becomes the cosmic consciousness, which is the you give yourself happily. Because you realize that you are all and everything is you yourself. So when you are giving to others, you are actually giving to yourself.
And I believe that I've read that Mother says, there everything is divine love.
Yes. So I don't think he is meaning in the other worlds. Or you can think of it in another way. The law of life of this law of love, going from a lower level to the higher level, is always static. Is there in any world? It is there. Then you can say it is there in any world. Or does he mean outside our Earth atmosphere? Does he mean that?
I don't think so.
Nor do I.
I don't think so. I think it's the gradations of consciousness.
Yeah, it's the different worlds that we
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Progress.
Proceed.
basic law remains the same. That's what he's saying. It changes character, but it's the same. I'll read that sentence again carefully. Okay.
in its life origin.
No, the one with the
Yeah.
any world sentence.
Yeah. In its life origin, the law of love is the impulse to realize and fulfill oneself in others and by others, to be enriched by enriching, to possess and be possessed, because without being possessed, one does not possess utterly. He's saying that the origin of this law of love starts at a life level. I think that's what he's saying. In the life, it is seed form. In the others, it gets developed more and more. Okay, so that completes the. So now the ascent of life has come from matter to life to mind. Yeah? So we go to the next para. It's also about a page. Okay. The inert incapacity of atomic existence to possess itself, the subjection of the material individual to the not self, belongs to the first status of life. First status of life is matter. The consciousness of limitation and the struggle to possess, to master both self and the not self, is the type of the secondary status, that is life. Here too, the development to the third status brings a transformation of the original terms into a fulfillment and a harmony which repeat the terms while seeming to contradict them. There comes about through association and through love a recognition of the not self as a greater self, and therefore a consciously accepted submission to its law and need, which fulfills the increasing impulse of aggregate life to absorb the individual. And there is a possession again by the individual of the life of others as his own, and of all that it has to give him as his own, which fulfills the opposite impulse of individual possession. Nor can this relation of mutuality between the individual and the world he lives in be expressed or complete or secure unless the same relation is established between individual and individual and between aggregate and aggregate. All the difficult effort of man towards the harmonization of self-affirmation and freedom by which he possesses himself with association and love, fraternity, comradeship, in which he gives himself to others, his ideals of harmonious equilibrium, justice, mutuality, equality, by which he creates a balance of the two opposites, are really an attempt, inevitably predetermined in its lines, to solve the original problem of nature, the very problem of life itself, by the resolution of the conflict between the two opposites which present themselves in the very foundations of life in matter. The resolution is attempted by the higher principle of mind, which alone can find the road towards the harmony intended, even though the harmony itself can only be found in a power still beyond us. Okay, we have to.
Well, gotta look at this one carefully.
Pardon?
We have to look at this one carefully.
Yeah, this slightly more complicated.
Yes.
But we'll see. He has talked about the terms. Now he is talking about the impotence, the incapacity. There is a third term. The first term was immortality of mechanical unconscious force. Second term was force-driven subconscious will. Now the third term in matter is impotence, incapacity of inert subconscious. So that's what he's saying. The inert incapacity of atomic existence to possess itself, the subjection of the material individual to the not self. So what does he mean by this? The subjection of the material individual, body, mind, life, to the not self is the universe. The universe is controlling your body, mind, life. You are dependent on the universe. The physical universe is, your body, mind, life is completely subject to the universal forces. That's what he's saying. And that's very easy to understand. I need food. I have to depend on the universe. So without that I can't live. So the individual physical unit is subjected to the other self. The other self is not you, but other is the universe. Okay, so
How would you say in terms of atomic existence?
Atomic existence means he is talking at the physical level.
Physical level.
Yeah, he has described it as the atomic existence, physical level.
Okay.
So the inert incapacity of atomic to possess itself, the subjection of the material individual to the not self, belongs to the first status of life. First status of life is matter. Second status of life is life itself. Third status of life is mind.
Like, can we say an example like within the atom, there is infinite energy, but since it doesn't possess itself, it's unable to express that. So can we see it in that way?
Yes. In fact, that's exactly what he's saying. It doesn't possess itself, means it can't do what it wants to with its power. It's a subconscious, inert subconscious. Impotence of inert subconscious. But that is why life comes out, because it is essentially divine and it doesn't want to remain imprisoned in matter. So life comes out. The first expression of this wanting to get freedom is life. The second manifestation of this wanting to get freedom is mind. It goes on like that. The consciousness of limitation and the struggle to possess, to master both self and the not self, is the type of the secondary status. He is talking of life. In life, you try to grab this hunger that he is talking about. It wants to dominate others. Even in the human beings, we want to control ourselves and control the universe, get everything from the universe. Look at the sentence carefully. The consciousness of limitation and the struggle to possess, to master both self and not self. Science is doing exactly that. It is trying to control not self and succeeding to a lot. Science does not think of controlling self. It thinks of only controlling the not self.
So not self,
Is the universe.
You would define as the universe.
Oh yes, very clearly. There's no
Good.
doubt about it.
Always.
Yes.
Not self
Yes.
is always.
Something outside me. But that would include even other individuals. Yeah.
Yes, we
Everything
saw
in the
that,
universe.
yes.
But not the universal consciousness.
No.
Okay.
It depends what level he is talking about.
Okay.
Okay. So when he is talking of the physical individual, he is talking of your body, your vital and your mind. And that is subject to the universal, physical universal. Okay, so, and this not self is something very, he discusses in many places. Not self means something exterior to you. But when you go to the cosmic consciousness, that not self becomes the self. Because you become everything. Everything is in you and you are in everything.
But not self you define as the universe.
Yes.
Good.
In a more broad way, you would say that which is outside yourself.
Okay.
You can say that. And that's the universe. And the universe includes everything. It includes individuals, it includes animals, it includes everything. And when we say the universe, we mean also at all the levels. Not only physical universe, but vital universe and mental universe. These words are there, no? So, consciousness of limitation and the struggle to possess, to master both self and the not self, is the type of the secondary status, that is life. The characteristic of life is to possess and become master of everything that it wants to. Here too, the development to the third status brings a transformation of the original terms into a fulfillment and a harmony which repeat the terms while seeming to contradict them. So let's try and understand what he's saying here. Okay, so he's saying in matter it is subconscious, inert impotence. In life it's a struggle to increase, expand, conquer and possess. That's what he's saying in life. That becomes in mind complete self-possession, but he's not talking of our mind, he is talking of the spiritual mind. There you possess yourself. After you make a mind silent and go into the higher mind onwards, you possess yourself. You get the experience of the self and you possess yourself. Therefore it is complete self-possession. Between higher mind and lower mind, complete self-possession. Okay, that's what he's saying. Then, and he's saying it fulfills and yet seems to contradict itself. That is clear? Because in matter, it is trying to, but it can't. In life, it is trying to expand, trying to conquer, but can't. But in mind, it can do that fully. Complete self-possession is possible. Then, yeah. Nor can this relation of mutuality between the individual and the world he lives in be expressed or complete or secure unless the same relation is established between individual and individual and between aggregate and aggregate. This is Sri Aurobindo's speciality. He always talks of the individual as well as the collectivity. The laws that operate in the individual must also operate at the collective level. Not only must an individual become free, but even the collectivity, that is society, must also graduate to another level of freedom. So here again he is talking of the same thing, that there has to be a harmony between individual and individual, but there should also be harmony between nations, aggregate and aggregate, which is not very happening very much now with Iran and US at loggerheads with each other. So that he says must happen. Then only there will be fulfillment, otherwise there won't be fulfillment. So established between individual and individual and between aggregate and aggregate. And aggregate not necessarily only nations, but even societies. Small societies, small families.
Groups.
Yeah, groups. Okay? Management and the unions.
Or between individual and nation.
Yeah. Like in Romeo and Juliet, the Capulets and the other family? Montagues. So it has to be aggregate and aggregate at all the levels. All the difficult effort of man towards the harmonization of self-affirmation and freedom by which he possesses himself with association and love, fraternity, comradeship, in which he gives himself to others, his ideals of harmonious equilibrium, justice, mutuality, equality, by which he creates a balance of the two opposites, are really an attempt inevitably predetermined in its lines to solve the original problem of nature, the very problem of life itself. by the resolution of the conflict between the two opposites which present themselves in the very foundation of life in matter. The two opposites are, you can see in many ways. First, there is the movement towards individuality. The other movement is towards unity. So these two are opposites. There is a form and one is going outwards. The unity and the individuality. So this problem is solved at the mind level because the individual becomes cosmic. Now he retains his individuality and yet he has become cosmic. The problem starting at the level of matter is solved. That's what he's saying. The two forces become harmonized. Neither is it harmonized in matter, neither is it harmonized in life. In mind, it is, you recognize the problem and you want cooperation and love and association, but it gets fulfilled in the higher mind level onwards. That's what he's saying. So, so all these things become possible: harmonious equilibrium, justice, mutuality, equality, by which he creates a balance of the two opposites, are really an attempt, inevitably predetermined in its lines, to solve the original problem of nature, the very problem of life itself, by the resolution of the conflict between the two opposites, which present themselves in the very foundation of life in matter. If he had spoken about the problem in life, there is another way of looking at it. Nature is constantly harmonizing opposites. He says that in Life Divine in the beginning. Matter is dead, life is something living. It solves the problem by harmonizing them and creating life. All life forms are a harmony between matter and life. So nature has solved the problem of harmonizing death and life. He sees it in that way. Then it harmonizes even more. He comes to the mind level, he starts thinking. Then final transformation, spirit and matter, they are absolute opposites, but it can get completely harmonized at the supramental level. So that also indication is there in this, that there is opposites are there all the time and nature is trying to harmonize the opposites. But here particularly he is talking of the individuality and the unity behind everything. Multiplicity and unity. Okay, so the resolution is attempted by the higher principle of mind, which alone can find the road towards the harmony intended, even though the harmony itself can only be found in a power still beyond us. He is hinting at the supermind.
Right. Right.
So, for if the data with which we have started are correct, the data is what he has said, that the terms, first term, second term, third term, this is the data that he is referring to. Immortality of atom, unconscious force, individual division, force-driven subconscious will, dumb merge of physical energy, impotence of inert subconscious. This is the data with which we have started. Okay? So, if the data with which we have started are correct, the end of the road, the goal itself, can only be reached by mind passing beyond itself into that which is beyond mind. Since of that, the mind is only an inferior term and an instrument, first for descent into form and individuality, and secondly for reascension into that reality which the form embodies and the individuality represents. Note the that with a T cap. Okay? Since of that, the mind is only an inferior term, he is referring to the supermind. Therefore, the perfect solution of the problem of life is not likely to be realized by association, interchange, and accommodations of love alone, or through the law of the mind and the heart alone. It must come by a fourth status of life, in which the eternal unity of the many is realized through the spirit, and the conscious foundation of all the operations of life is laid no longer in the divisions of body, nor in the passions and hungers of the vitality, nor in the groupings and imperfect harmonies of the mind, nor in a combination of all these, but in the unity and freedom of the spirit.
Beautiful.
So the problems of life will get solved fully in the spirit. This is the ascension, the ascent of life from the lowest level to the highest level. He has spoken about life here because he is dealing with the life problems. He is going one by one. Next is he'll be dealing with the problem of, there are 4 or 5 chapters on life. What is the problem of life? Its difficulties and the difficulties for yoga, what life presents, the problems that he will discuss. So the problem of life. This it is that is called the universal life. Taittiriya Upanishad. The Lord is seated in the heart of all beings, turning all beings, mounted upon a machine by his Maya. This is from the Gita. He who knows the truth, the knowledge, the infinity that is Brahman, shall enjoy with the all-wise Brahman all objects of desire. So, in the first paragraph, he normally summarizes whatever he has said. So, we'll see what he's saying. Life is, we have seen, the putting forth under certain cosmic circumstances of a conscious force which is in its own nature infinite, absolute, untrammeled, inalienably possessed of its own unity and bliss, the conscious force of Satchidananda. The central circumstance of this cosmic process, insofar as it differs in its appearances from the purity of the infinite existence and the self-possession of the undivided energy, is the dividing faculty of the mind obscured by ignorance. There results from this divided action of an undivided force the apparition of dualities, oppositions, seeming denials of the nature of Satchidananda, which exists as an abiding reality for the mind, but only as a phenomenon, misrepresenting a manifold reality for the divine cosmic consciousness concealed behind a veil of mind. Hence, the world takes on the appearance of a clash of opposing truths, each seeking to fulfill itself, each having the right to fulfillment, and therefore of a mass of problems and mysteries which have to be solved, because behind all this confusion there is the hidden truth and unity pressing for the solution, and by the solution for its own unveiled manifestation in the world. Was it clear?
Fairly clear. I like that apparition.
Yeah.
Apparition of dualities.
Yeah. Appearances, or what is it?
There results from the divided action of an undivided force the apparition of dualities, oppositions.
Okay. There results from this the apparition of dualities, because these are an interesting way of explaining also the dualities.
Yeah.
When the divine is creating, his nature is infinite, so he goes on creating infinitely. So, suppose he is creating light, he will not create light of only one intensity. He will create light of all intensities. 100-watt bulb, 500-watt bulb, 1000-watt bulb, 2000-watt bulb, infinite-watt bulbs, but also on the negative side. So you have, for everything that he is creating, there will be 2 poles. This is the reason for the dualities here in the world. Because he is creating infinitely, everything gets expressed. There is another way of seeing, there is no limit to, he doesn't limit his creation. So there are 2 poles, always opposite poles. If there is light, there is darkness. They are really the same thing, but at 2 different ends. If there is good, there seems to be apparent evil. The apparition is saying it starts appearing as though it is dualities, but actually they are not dualities at all. light and darkness are really the same thing in different grades, the two poles. Even science is telling you that. Science also tells you that absolute cold doesn't exist. It is only heat that exists. And heat, absence of heat is cold. Cold doesn't exist by itself. And Sri Aurobindo says this also of darkness doesn't exist by itself. It's not a fundamental reality. It is the absence of light. It is the light, the power of light to hide itself and become less. Ignorance also is not a fundamental reality. It's a dependent reality. So that's where the duality is coming.
But the word apparition is interesting because it's seemingly,
That's right.
almost like a ghost.
Yes. I think he is using the word apparition here. The suggestion of what you're saying is there. But the apparition, I think, is the appearance, the beginning. You start seeing them coming into existence. In that sense, he is using the word apparition here.
Ah,
Becoming visible.
Yes. I think he's using
Duality
it there.
starts.
Yeah. But the word, as he's saying, apparition also has got another meaning of ghost. So, because really what you're seeing, duality are ghost forms. They are not realities. So that suggestion also is there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he has told you exactly what it is. Life, he's saying, is nothing but conscious force manifesting itself in the physical world. Okay, so the results from this divide, and when it is coming down, the division is caused by the mind principle. It is the mind that is like the prism. There is white light coming, and the prism has the capacity to break it up into 7 colors. So the mind, overmind onwards, with its capacity of Maya, breaks it into an apparent division. The division is apparent. You look at it from another angle and another height, there is no division. At our level, we see division. You go up to the higher mind level, you start seeing the oneness of things. There is another way of also explaining this, even scientifically. I am seeing 7 colors. What is the reality of each color? Nothing but vibration of energy at a particular frequency. If it is vibrating at a certain frequency, red. If it is vibrating at another frequency, yellow. Another frequency, blue. So blue, yellow and red are only appearances to your senses. The senses are interpreting these vibrations, which are essentially all only vibrations. And your senses are interpreting them as colors. But when mother is in her consciousness, she is seeing everything in the original vibrations. Everything is vibrations. That is the reality. And that's what you say when you go to the higher mind level. You start seeing the oneness. The essential quality is oneness of everything. That is why you also have the rather stunning statement that good and evil also are the same. The vibration, qualitatively, the vibrations are the same. Only quantity changes. Then, generosity and miserliness, same. Light and darkness, same. No difference. You go to that level, you see the oneness. Even ignorance and knowledge. Sri Aurobindo says, ignorance is a power of knowledge to make itself less and veil itself. So it's the same thing, but in different angles.
But the mind cannot see it that way. The mind divides.
No, the divine mind will not see that way. The divine mind will see the reality of what it is doing. There are so many ways of looking at these things. You can say in another way, the divine wants to see what he has created in many, many ways. He wants to see from this angle, he wants to see from this angle. From this angle, he's saying, I want to see the unity of things. Then he comes down here and says, I want to see the division of things. So for us it is ignorance and something negative, because we are used to only this and we have not seen the other one. That's so appealing to you. But if you are only in that one, then you would like to see this also in this way. So Sri Aurobindo says there is no superior and inferior. It's only a different way of seeing. So if you want the divine, you must have everything, right from the top to the bottom. We feel it a nuisance because we are imprisoned in the ignorance. But ignorance also is something the divine is intending to do. He is looking at everything in the multiplicity. You go to the higher level, you start seeing the oneness. But if you are stuck only there, that also is an ignorance. Because you are seeing only one aspect of the divine. That is Sri view. And that is the reason why he says we must combine both. Matter and spirit. I think
when he speaks about death, he says that in one body we have not been able to experience all that the soul wants to experience.
That's right. So death is a process of life.
Yes.
It gives you the chance to have different experiences so that your knowledge increases.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste.